Dr. Bear and I are continuing our research on the synchrony of literacy development in individuals with extra X chromosomes. We're going to expand that to all of the chromosome variants because we think we're seeing something unique, and we're mostly seeing developmental delay in the group that we've studied so far, so we want to extend that.
Could you define synchrony of literacy?
Right. Synchrony of literacy development means that your reading, your writing, and your spelling develop at the same time. So if you think that your reading level is high but their spelling is low, the reading they're compensating for, their literacy development is that low because they develop together. They don't develop separately. And this evolved out of my master's thesis on the orthographic development of individuals with extra X chromosomes, for which we had all trisomy X volunteers.
What is orthographic?
Spelling. So we're going to go through these things this morning, an overview of our work. I'll explain how we measure the synchrony, how they develop together, how we assess it, and how you teach reading. But the most important thing for me to get to are the 5 case studies. That's why I'm going to really power through the first 4 things. And so that's why it's going to seem very quick. We can answer questions at the end. If I go through any of that too quickly, it's very common sense based, so it'll be easy for you to see where we're going with that. If I go too quickly, we'll refresh on that at the end. I really want you to hear the 5 case studies. They are all trisomy X girls. So I think that's going to be important for you to hear. This is hosted through the EL Cord Foundation Center for Learning and Literacy at the University of Reno, Nevada. And their goals are improving literacy instruction and through training and through servicing children. And this particular study that I'm presenting this morning has 15 cases. It is IRB approved through the University of Nevada, Reno, which is really important for you to always look for in a study because IRB protects the subjects. If it is not IRB approved, it may or may not protect your daughters, but when it goes through the institutional review boards, they want to protect their name, and they're not going to let you do a study that in any way adversely affects those participants. And so they are the ones that took 9 months for me to get the approval because they wanted to make sure none of the children would be harmed in any way or that their privacy would in any way be violated through this study. And so the IRB approval is really important. We set up a website called anextrakiss.com. That is where you go. You download the consent forms, you download the spelling test, and a parent survey. It's a 4-question parent survey. It's a 30-word spelling test. From that information, from these 15 cases, we were able to learn a lot about their development. Once you sent that in, we actually give you personal feedback on what level we found your daughter to be performing at in spelling. Then we correlate that with what level that indicates for her reading, and we give you examples of what kind of instruction would be appropriate for her and what kind of reading materials would be appropriate for her to be working in. And then we end with a disclaimer: we are not doing diagnosis because the child is not coming to the center being tested. Even though it's just a spelling test, you're giving it at the kitchen table, or you're giving it to your child maybe after a sporting event that got her real jazzed, or maybe on a day when she wasn't feeling as well. We don't have any way of assessing what happened during that spelling test or what was happening before or after, so we don't define it as diagnostic. This is what the test indicates. If it disagrees with what you already know about your daughter, pursue further, but it probably won't. They're pretty indicative of where they are. And then we send you a scope and sequence, which you could share with your child's teacher or tutors, saying these are the areas that would be most efficient to be tutoring her in at this point. And we give you a book recommendation list. This is a guideline for what level they're at. We're not saying that these are the only books that they should be reading. A little review on response to intervention, which is the RTI program that all of the schools are using. Most children are level 1. This is the total population. If your child isn't responding to the classroom instruction, Then they move to a level 2 where they get smaller group instruction and a little more time. But these are the aides that are working with your children. It doesn't have to be a licensed teacher or a licensed special ed teacher to work at this level. But if you go to this level and they still are responding to instruction, you move to the 3rd level, which we used to refer to as special education. This education is less than 3 people in the group, so it could be as small as one-on-one instruction, and it is with a professional. So this is your trained special ed teacher. Of the girls in our study, 12 had IEPs. They were already on individual instruction plans, so they were at level 3. That is a skewed population because we went through the support group to get these students. Many trisomy girls would not be on an IEP. The one girl we had who was not on an IEP has professional parents who keep her in tutoring even though she's not showing the delay, which may be mitigating her showing that. Who does not respond to intervention? Dr. Bear and I agree that the last person, Frank Valentino, is the study that we like to focus on, which shows you that out of 1,000 students in a one-on-one instructional setting, only 1.5 did not respond to that instruction, which means they just need more time and more individualized instruction to get there. And that allows us to develop a delay model rather than saying that they have a deficit. If you go with the deficit, that something is missing. They're not going to get this concept. A difference, they have to learn in a different way. We are going at the research with a delay model. The girls just need more time and more individual instruction to catch up on their literacy. So synchrony of literacy instruction, and Bennett asked earlier about what the synchrony meant. Your reading and spelling develop at the same rate. So your reading indicates your spelling level indicates your reading level. But which is easier to assess? The spelling. And so we chose to assess the spelling. The grade levels don't mean much to us because we're looking at delayed children. And so, but what does matter to us is what spelling level they're at, because that indicates their reading. So if we look at this one, you can see the word float here, F-L-O-T. If a child spells the word float, F-L-O-T, on the spelling test, I follow straight up. They are a letter name, alphabetic speller, and they are a beginning reader, which means they'll be reading things out loud. They should be reading rhyming things. But if they spell float, F-L-O-T-E, then they are a transitional reader and need a different level of instruction. And with our girls, where testing causes anxiety and they don't like sitting still for a long amount of time, the difference between giving a 2-hour reading assessment and giving a 30-word spelling test is huge. And I can give you the same information as for what their literacy level is from that spelling test. Now, the last level of spelling development is the derivational level. You can see the word pleasure. Think about the word please being in pleasure, and you'll get the EA in there when you spell it, okay? So pleasure is a derivational. They start looking at the meanings of words and how they developed the origin of the word. And then those derivational spellers are advanced readers, and your advanced reader can actually skim and scan information. They can read for a specific meaning. It isn't just pleasure reading. They read. Reading becomes a tool for the advanced reader. Then we look at the functional levels. When you assess development, you always look at what the student knows. We don't need to give them instruction on what they already know. They use but confuse is where you should be teaching them. What they're using but confusing. And then you look at what they're leaving absent. So, when we look at that again, if we look at what the student knows, that is their independent level. If we look at what they use but confuse, that is the instructional level. That's where they're going to be taught. If you look at what they leave absent, that's their frustrational level. And if you try to teach anyone at their frustration level, they are not going to get it. You have to keep instruction at the instructional level. And these slides are available to you at the genetic.org site. They have all of these for you as a handout. We pulled from Words Their Way. Dr. Baer helped develop this program and has authored many books on it. This is a developmental program that uses spelling to teach phonics and vocabulary, because it builds their vocabulary and how they move on. So the spelling tests are scripted, and that turned out to be very, very important. When you go to anextrakiss.com and you download that spelling test, you don't make up your own sentences and you don't make up your own words. These were all research-based choices for the words so that they would indicate to us the level. At anextrakiss.com, you download the spelling and you read bed. I hopped out of bed this morning. Bed. And then your child spells bed. That turned out to be really important because when we had some errors, we had to check those sentences to make sure the word that they spelled wasn't anywhere in that sentence, because some of the children put down different words. And if it was in the sentence, it would have indicated an error in that way. When it wasn't, then we knew it was a frustration level that they had maxed out on their ability to concentrate. So then the children spell the words for us, and we are able to correlate it with not just a stage, but whether it's early within word, middle within word, or late within word. And then we will give you specific feedback on what kind of instruction would be most effective for your child. And we can also check and see if all of the girls are glitching on a certain, in a certain area. We take those words and we put check, check, check by what they got right, what they got wrong. I usually circle so that I know I've looked at it, and then wherever they miss 2 words or 2 of the same area, that is the level that they will be starting at. This is a mathematic regression line showing that spelling is your conservative measure. So when your children are being asked, does she read at a 4th grade level, we need to be asking, does she spell at a syllable affix level? Because the spelling is going to be your most conservative measure, which means if you use that as your guide for choosing your instructional materials, you're not going to get them into their frustration level. You will be working at their instructional level if you base your materials on their spelling level, because it is the conservative measure. But you already knew that, because you knew that you could read words that you can't spell. But it's very rare to be able to spell a word that you can't read. So you knew this intuitively. And the example that's given is of a transitional reader who can read 1 and 2 syllable words, but can only spell and is still using but confusing the single syllable words. Okay? So we look at the spelling assessment, and then the teachers use it to develop programs that they can develop in the classroom for grouping the kids. And then on the concordance, you look at if they're at that spelling level, this is what reading level would be appropriate for them. Okay? Okay, the spelling inventories are given repeatedly over time because you can use them to show development. You can use them to see how they're responding to that instruction. So in the classroom, you give it 3 times a year is usually what we give it. But that way, you can tell that they're progressing. Even if they still miss the same number of words, if their errors are getting more accurate, you can tell that they're progressing in that. So you check them off. They've used this program in lots of different schools in longitudinal studies, and they're seeing amazing growth rates where the children move entire levels during the school year. We're not saying that that is normal. Our girls need to be continually growing. We cannot say whether they're succeeding or not by the speed, because if they need more time, they need more time. And that's what we need to give them. Literacy instruction is usually taught using ROOT, which is read to your children, read with, write with, word study, and talk with. In the center and at UNR, we usually focus on the 2 that are asterisks, Because in the normal classroom, they're going to be read to. And in the normal classroom, they're going to write, and they're going to be talking with others, but the reading with them, where they actually sit and read. Most people who are afraid with reading will avoid reading in public. So they need to be in a smaller setting where they will read with you. And the word study is a phonics development. Yes, Ben?
When you say read with, you mean you read for a while, then they read for a while, back and forth?
Right, back and forth. But it is in a smaller setting. They're not going to be real comfortable doing round-robin reading across the whole room. So you read two, either in a small setting or a large. You read with them, sitting with them. You've got the same book that they have, or you're reading over their shoulder with them. It's not choral reading where you're reading at the same time as them. Okay? You write, and the word study, where they learn the patterns of the words. And word study is phonics and spelling and vocabulary all in one. Okay? So these children, you can see, I thought the OT should see some of these slides because I think she would approve of the program, because they cut the list of words apart, they manipulate them, move them into the sorts, and then they write them. So they've got all of that practice all in one activity. The important thing to me here is students learn more about reading from spelling than they learn about spelling from reading. So when you're doing spelling instruction, it counts as improving their reading. If you're practicing reading, you're not necessarily going to have any improvement in the spelling. Okay, I'll walk through the stages. There are 5 stages that I already showed a slide for you. We start out with the emergent reader. These are the babies learning to read. You know, the kindergarten, first grade, where you do a lot of rhyming, you do a lot of wordless books, but you're learning to turn the pages. Then we go to the letter name. This is all out loud. Don't let anyone tell your child they have to read silently when they're at this level. They have to read out loud, and let them do that. Then we go within word pattern. We're starting to get into more of the digraphs, a little harder things, the syllable affect, the inflected endings as they go up, and finally the derivational, which there are children in high school that have not reached derivational level. That is holding them back from being able to handle those textbooks. We need to help the children move along as they get there. It's interesting. Okay, so your emergent reader starts out as an emergent speller, and you can see how we've got our two-fisted simian grip as he's trying to move along. This is still writing. They're doing these as symbols, and they know what they say. And this you can see, as you go through, you can see how the emergent writer continues to progress to where it begins to be exact shapes, then shapes replicating, and then shapes replicating in a linear format. So you can see how they develop along. This is a spelling test for an emergent speller. The first word is bed. That's good. They got the last sound, and they correlated that the duh sound was a D. The next one is ship. So they got the first letter, they got the last letter. So that's important. The next word is drive. That's, Dr. Bear says that's an articulatory gesture. The ja feels like a DR in your mouth, and the DR is one of the last things that develops. So when you see a J or a G in place of the DR, that's very spelling appropriate for them and developmentally appropriate for an emergent reader. A really important thing for development of reading is concept of word, and I wish I could redesign baby books. The OT would like to put in, instead of just when do they crawl, when do they write, they'd also like you to mark down when did they develop pinch or grasp. For the reading teachers, we want you to mark down at what stage did your child get concept of word. When did they see that that wasn't just a string of symbols, but that it was in separate sections. So the concept of word is really important. They cannot learn phonics and develop through until they've got concept of word. In Dr. Bear's current research, he found that of 58 preschoolers, the ones who can tap a pattern can also get concept of word, where they see that the words separate from each other. Okay? And this is emergent readers need to be doing the rhyming patterns over and over and over again. This little girl had a problem with concept of word. her because when she got up to read this, she said, 1, 2, buckle my, because buckle my was one word. And now the next thing she does is she points to the word my and says shoe, and then she looks at shoe and doesn't know where to go with it because she doesn't have anything, because she put buckle my together. So she's not a concept of word and shouldn't be given phonics instructions yet. She's got to have time developing the other. I shouldn't say she shouldn't be given phonics instruction. You're going to hit her frustration level really quickly because she's not using and confusing phonics. She's at the point where she hasn't developed her concept of word yet. Okay, so this is, yay, we made it to the trisomy girls. So we get to talk about the ones. This is a trisomy girl who is in first grade. She's had OT for handwriting and she's had early speech delays. She was not getting language instruction at the point that she took this. Any supports in the school for that because they weren't yet seeing reading delays because she's a first grader. They weren't seeing a reading delay. So she took the spelling test off of anextrakiss.com. They downloaded the primary spelling test. She took the test and she wrote fan as fine. So we got to looking through this, and she has some errors that make a lot of sense in spelling. We don't just go through and say, oh, so many wrong. We look at how she made that error. So when she spells wait, W-I-A-T, instead of W-A-I-T, that's not terribly alarming, and other people might have done that. When she spells gum, G-O-U-M, if she had spelled it G-U-M or G-O-M, it would have made sense. But it's a fairly unique error that she put the O-U in that. When she spelled bad, that's a wonderful developmental error. And it looks like she's using but confusing the vowels. But when she spells, look at number 21, she's doing growl. If you look at how she spelled growl, you'll see growl. She's got the sounds, but she fell apart on the order. So at that point, we must have gotten to her frustration level because she has all the sounds, but she mixed them up. The other thing you're noticing, I'm sure, is all the silent E's. She put 23 silent final E's. When, to spell them correctly, there are 4 words that end in silent E. My guess is that this is a sign of incidental learning. She's not at the point that the teacher would have been giving her instruction on silent final E or the long vowels that way. But she heard someone else in the class getting that instruction, or she overheard it at home with older sisters and brothers. So she's smart enough to know what that means, but because she's not at that developmental stage, she over-applies it. And you'll see that with some of the other girls, where the incidental learning, they heard it in the classroom, they weren't at that level, so they over-applied what they were hearing. So we took her spelling test, we checked off where she was, and decided that she would be at the stage where she would be doing the letter name, which would involve picture sorts. So they don't have to be reading yet to do this, they can say the words. She would do picture sorts. When she got into words, she would sort them and write them, and play games with the words. And these are some of the things the Words Their Way does for teaching it. There are other programs. As long as it is a developmental model, the children are going to thrive, but it needs to be developmental, not memorization, which is playing to their weakness. So this is our next candidate our next participant was a 5th grader when we got this assessment. And she still has, at 5th grade, she still has some speech anomalies. So she held it together pretty well at the start. That's what you would expect. These spelling tests are designed to start very simple, single-syllable words and build to harder words. So the children have some success at the start. The only thing alarming is She is in 5th grade, and on number 6, when she was asked to spell train, she didn't get an R in train, and she doubled it in. That's not something you would expect to see with a 5th grader. You would expect her to sail through the first half of this test with no errors, and then make errors later. But you can see we get to her frustration level really quickly. Carries is not going to work when you're spelling it that way. And so she begins to fall apart. By the time she gets to opposition, she doesn't even have a P in it. And I may misspell opposition, but I'm going to have a P in it when I do. All right? So this was Abby's spelling, or this was her reading assessment, and you'll see what she's doing. She is a 5th grader, and she scores at grade level for her passage comprehension, which means she is compensating like crazy to get meaning out of the comprehension questions. And she's getting very good at figuring out how to answer multiple choice things. But you notice her word attack is at the 2nd grade level. So Abby also took a standardized test through the school, and it showed that she is reading at grade level according to their standardized test. So her parents were asked if they could reduce her special education support because her reading was at grade level. And I want you to resist that kind of temptation, because reading comprehension is not reading. Reading comprehension is part of reading. Until she has the word attack skills and the spelling skills, she has to have that support in place. So we were able to look at her spelling scores and the subtest scores and say, no, let's continue her support, so that the parents could ask the school to continue the support until the lowest indicator of literacy development, spelling, shows she's at grade level. She needs to have that. So this is a sample of her writing. Go to my grandmom in Oregon. Up there, we go to a rock garden that had peacocks. That child doesn't need support in the school for literacy development, but the standardized test showed that she didn't. And so that's why we have to convince them that the spelling indicates the literacy development. It's the most conservative measure, but let's base her services on when she's at level in that. And so I thought that was really important for them. She was at the center at UNR, and they had old spelling tests, and you can see how number 16, COOI, for coach. She's not in the ballpark, and you are going to be teaching her at her frustration level if you're giving her textbooks or anything that are above the level of her spelling. So she is at the within word pattern. These are the kind of activities she would do. We're looking at what is the sound in man, sound of the A in man, sound of the A in cape. Then you sort by picture. Bag, map, all go under man, and then tape and tray go under cape. So and then she can, after she sorts by picture, she can sort by word. Then you can talk to her about, it's a consonant, vowel, consonant, consonant, vowel, consonant, silent, E, that do that. So all of these sorts work her slowly up in her development of understanding how those words are spelled. And she sorts her words, she plays the games with them, and she moves on to other levels. This is the next level, which Caroline was at, the early syllable affect. She's a 7th grader. The parent survey is only 4 questions, but it was really rich with data. And her mother pointed out that she has trouble processing sounds, but difficulty with nonsense syllables. Difficulty applying phonics rules to nonsense syllables because she's not at that level where she can apply all of them. So here she is. Again, a 7th grader, we would assume, would cruise through that spelling test and not make any errors until the end of the test. But she doesn't. When she gets up to number 4, when she's trying to spell lump and spells it with an O instead of a U, that's somewhat alarming for a 7th grader to make that error. When she's spelling float, F-L-O-T, at 7th grade, that's indicating that she's got some delays in her development. So we go through, and you can see what happened at the end. From number 20 on, that was just frustration level. If you're giving her instruction at that level, you're not going to see what she can or can't do, because she's beyond where she's able to function. So she had difficulty processing sounds and difficulty with nonsense syllables, but she went ahead and took other tests for us. You can see she left the CH off of coach on number 13. And then again, she comes apart on us a little bit as we get further down on the list. When you go into the syllable affects, I do this a lot with 4th graders. This child is in 9th grade, so she's going to be needing some support if she's syllable affect level at the 9th grade. So she has to have some language support and some support working with textbooks and the writing assignments, I'm sure. Okay? So she goes through, and she's making a pretty good job here, but I talked to Dr. Lucker about number 11 when she did spoil. It is very, very uncommon, and possibly we're looking to see if we're finding unique errors to this population. To spell something with a P and a B together. She would not have seen that in her reading. But the P and the B together, they both make the same sound, and you heard Dr. Lucker yesterday say, they have to guess which it is. Do I use a P or a B? She just covered her bases and put both as she went through on that. And then she holds it together as we go through. But look at number 25. When she was guessing, it is not uncommon for children to misspell the word opposition. It is unusual for them not to replace the sh sound with another digraph or something that makes the sh sound. If she had simply spelled it with an SH, that would have been a very conventional error. But the fact that she spelled opposition with an L is alarming. That is alarming and indicates that she needs more instruction in that area. So we go on through her spelling errors. You can see, remember how our girls are, we are always told they are very, very compliant. There are 3 spelling tests at anextrakiss.com that you can download. You're told to start with the elementary one. If they miss all of the ones in all of the first 10, don't do anymore. You're going to frustrate them. Move back to the primary one. But if they spell all but 2 words correct on the elementary, please go to the upper level. This young lady wanted to do all 3 no matter what. And so she filled out all 3, and I'm glad she did, because we found some interesting errors as she went through. But the upper level test was basically an exercise in frustration for her. It was hard for us to glean too much out of this, because she was at her frustration level. But we could see some interesting errors that she made. Okay, so rising out of the black hole, your transitional readers, they say it's the Wright brothers of reading. It's hard work for them to get off the ground. They can't stay up for very long, and it doesn't take much to bring them down. They just have a problem. But as spellers, it takes them a long time to get out of this spelling level. They may be a number of years in this spelling level, because it takes a long time, even with really good instruction, to get them through it. And so these are some of the things that the schools can do to help support that. And again, this is available to you in the handout, which they posted online at genetic.org for you to see. Okay, so now we move to your upper level reading behaviors of the animated reader. Now they're reading silently, and they prefer to read silently because they found out that it's faster. They can develop a variety of different reading styles. If they're reading a pleasure book, they'll read it differently than reading a biology book. Okay, they can research, they can skim and scan, and they look at different genres as they go through. So these are the kind of instructions you're going to be giving them now. When do you double the consonant when you're adding an inflected end? When do you not do it? And these are the kind of word studies that they do. So this is Jenny. She's at the early derivational level, and she was diagnosed with reading and writing language. Remember when Aaron said yesterday that his parents kept him in tutoring and kept pushing him, and he didn't know if they would do that if they had known the diagnosis earlier? Her parents did know the diagnosis, and still said, no, she's behind, she's going to stay in tutoring. She stayed in tutoring for a very long time, and this is very good spelling. She had 3 years of very intense instruction and is now scoring above grade level on her language development when they tested her to go into high school. So all of her errors are conventional. They're things that we would expect for her to miss, and she missed them in a way that made sense phonetically. So the derivational student still has language instruction. She's going to read materials fluently. She's got flexible reading styles. She's going to be able to develop her research and specialized vocabulary reading skills, and she can explore different kinds of reading. So they still have reading and spelling work to do, even though they're able to spell double-syllable, multi-syllable words. Now we start teaching them how the words medicinal and medicine are linked, because that helps them with the spelling of both. And then we move through, they practice together in groups. And this is the program that we use. It's the Words Their Way program. What I like about the smaller book, rather than the big book tells you the theory. This tells you all the theory behind it and how it was developed and how to do the instruction. These are just all of the spelling sorts together. And the books cost $14 each. And for me, it was really nice to be able to have a guide in the classroom that worked out very developmentally as we went along. So that is the basis of our study, is that we're looking at and have found so far developmental delays. Now we want to continue this study, not only to see if we're seeing the developmental delays in a broader population, but also to see if we start to see what interventions they're responding to. So that